Let's go!
I really didn't actually keep up with this, and I think it's better that I didn't. My understanding of the situation is that Kazuya's in Smash Brothers, and a lot of Smash's audience is absolutely differentiated from a usual fighting game audience, right? Usually Smash players, when it comes, or at least fighting games, they most of the time they tend to stick to their own. With Smash Brothers, that is so exemplified that it's crazy, where their audience is 10 times bigger than any fighting game audience there is. With that being said, you're just gonna get a whole bunch of people that want things to be in the game or see things that are in the game that they have no idea what the hell it is. Luckily, Daddy Sakurai makes Smash Brothers, and what is Daddy Sakurai? A fighting game fan. This guy created Smash Brothers because of his fighting game experience. Craziest things is that you have one of the most accessible fighting games, but also crazy deep and has an insane high level to it and a lot of player expression and stuff like that. But it's coming from a dude that literally is like a huge fighting game fan. And in Smash Brothers Ultimate, you see that. You see him putting all of his love for fighting games as much as he possibly can with any little bit of wiggle room. He gets to do what he wants. Kazuya's in the game because Nintendo doesn't make Smash Brothers. Bandai Namco makes Smash Brothers. Bandai Namco has made Smash Brothers for almost a decade now. But so many people from the Smash front are like, they added another Shoto to Smash. You think that Kazuya is a Shoto? Now, this is an interesting conversation because I am Shoto man, right? I love Street Fighter because of Shotokan characters. I really do. They're not the only characters that I play or the characters that I really like in Street Fighter, but dude, we have had conversations about Shotos with Yo Video Games for what feels like a half a decade. What constitutes a Shoto? What is a Shoto? Is there a hybrid Shoto? Is there limited Shotos? And I think we can answer some of these questions. What the hell is a Shoto? So, evidence A, we're gonna look at this man, dump truck of a man. His name is Ryu. He is the original Shoto, right? What all this comes from is a term called Shotokan, right? And it's like a style of martial arts, technically from Japan, right? I'm not too sure if Shotokan karate or something like that is technically real, but in terms of Street Fighter, this is the guy that begins Shoto, right? The term Shoto doesn't really have anything to do with like real life martial arts. Yeah, so Shotokan karate is real, but does Ryu probably represent any form of real life martial arts that we can distinguish of him being a Shoto? Absolutely not, because there are some key definitions of what makes a Shoto. Because we have Mr. Second Shoto, the second Shoto to ever exist, and his name is Kenneth. Look at this, absolute pinnacle of a man. The next Shoto. What were the differences between Ryu and Ken of Shoto-ness? Very minor. Not too many differences in the very early days of Street Fighter. Only did it take some time for them to eventually grow and really deviate from their original playstyle. But what makes these two characters Shotos? One could say it is their costumes, right? And I would agree with you. Shoto costumes are very identifiable, right? You have this like very loose garb at the top. You got a belt, you got a headband, usually of some kind. You possibly could look like Owen fucking Wilson. A lot of these things are generally disregarded, right? But a lot of casual people to fighting games will look at these elements and think that, oh, you know, a Shoto is gonna look this way, and that's just because that's what makes them a Shoto. However, that is not exactly true. The definition for a Shoto over many years has included a multitude of different facets. And yeah, visuals are definitely one of the earliest things you can call out in that regard. Things start taking a big turn because you get some new characters that start mixing it up. And then this guy shows up and he's like, hey, I'm a Shoto too. And he's 100% right. There's a new Shoto in town. Granted, it took a long time. Crazy enough, Ryu and Ken were like some of the most popular characters in Street Fighter for a hell of a long time. Akuma really started throwing things for a loop. Is he that much different? No. But all these three characters, these are the original triage of shotos. They have a fireball of some kind, a Hadouken, an uppercut called a Shoryuken, and they have a spinning kick called a Tatsumaki Senpu Kyaku, or a Tatsu. These three key elements are the things that eventually define a shoto in many ways. So much so that these three characters go on to inspire and create so many different fighting game characters throughout the pantheon of history that a very large majority of at least 2D fighting games will start with a shoto-like character. A character that essentially has an uppercut, a fireball, and a tatsu of some kind, and maybe some other small elements here and there. But it gets kind of weird, right? Because there are so many different variances in between this area. The visual style of shotos are one thing, but then you have to start asking yourself other things. Is this guy a shoto? Sean, Ken Master's training partner. Is Sean a shoto? Weirdly enough, some people will say yes, and some people might say no. He does feature a couple of key qualities that you know of shoto. He definitely looks like the other dudes, but he's now wearing a banana costume. He absolutely looks like a shoto. However, upon closer inspection, he does have an uppercut. He has a Tatsu-like move, I'd like to say. It's not exactly the same. But Sean does not have a traditional fireball. He can't just throw a Hadouken. He didn't learn that shit yet. He only can do it through a super. He has to use meter to throw a fireball of any kind. We have a variant now, right? We essentially have the Shoto that skipped through time and Loki is hunting his ass. Very topical. But what I would like to call Sean is a limited shoto. He's one of these characters that doesn't exactly have the traits of other shotos, but definitely has a lot of the visual elements. The same can be said for this little guy, fan favorite Dan Hibiki. Once again, another very good example of a limited shoto. Does he have a traditional long-range fireball? No, not really. It's supposed to suck. Things are supposed to be bad on this guy. And actually, it would be better if I talked about Dan before Sean, because there is some very big similarities between these characters. They were both designed to be bad, right? Literally designed to not be great. And you really see that with Sean in Third Strike when they toned him down. There's an interesting style. All these characters feature the same thing: fireball, uppercut, Hadouken, these core elements. However, some weird shit starts happening when you start considering other characters. How about this guy who conveniently murdered Dan's father? Now we're asking our asses a question. Is Sagat a shoto? And I have been in arguments with people in this room with Yo Video Games and with other people that have told me, yes, Sagat is a shoto. I would respectfully disagree. There is some situations here that are very different. Number one, obviously, he doesn't look like a shoto. He does not feature the traditional gi. However, he does have a fireball. He does have an uppercut. He does have a tatsu type of move, but it goes in the wrong direction. He has a tiger knee. So to me, there's a big deviation here. He's doing shoto-like things, but he's technically, in my opinion, not a shoto. By many other definitions, would a tatsu be a tatsu and a tiger knee be like the same thing? I don't think so. Granted, tatsus can go forward. Tatsus can also go back depending if you jump in many ways. But this is a moment of disagreement for a lot of people. Like, Sagat might not be considered a shoto to some, but also might be considered a shoto to others. Let's get a little crazy here. Hang on a sec. This gentle young spirit, this man, Terrence Bogard, has already infiltrated the likes of Smash. And at that point, I think even other Smash players would have looked at Terry and thought, we already have Ken in this game. We already have Ryu in this game. We're getting another shoto. Little do they realize, Terry is not a shoto. There might be some areas of contention, but I think largely understood by the existence of these characters for a very long time, and especially like an SNK character. Terry is not SNK shoto, man. One, he does have a fireball. It is a grounded fireball, which is sort of a SNK staple. He does have a Tatsu-like move with, you know, with like jump kick, right? He does have an uppercut. However, his uppercut is a charge motion and is not the same as a Shoryuken in any way. That is very different. He also looks different, and Terry's his own thing. In my opinion, Terry is not a shoto. He is not the SNK shoto. Why is he not the SNK shoto? Because SNK shotos already exist. This is going to be the history lesson here. This dude is literally KOF shoto. For people that don't know exactly what's going on, SNK fighting games were very much influenced by Capcom fighting games back in the early 90s. Why is that? Well, a lot of the development staff that worked on Street Fighter 2 jumped ship and went to SNK. So when they were making characters like Terry and Ryo and the Art of Fighting crew and everything like that, a lot of them were almost direct references, which created a beef between SNK and Capcom in the very early days. And Ryo is pretty much that. So much so that in terms of the Shoto-verse, right? Ryo is a good example of the SNK version of a Shoto. He has like almost all the defining features with a little bit more. There was an answer to Ryo on the Capcom end, and it was this guy. This guy was made by Capcom to make fun of this guy. So now we have Shotos being created from other Shotos that are mimicking other Shotos, but are now specifically designed to be limited, less effective versions of those Shotos. The story gets even weirder because from this point forward, you might be looking at other fighting games and being like, damn, how many Shotos are there? Were fighting games in the 90s nothing but Shotos? And then you go and look at a little game that came out before Tekken. And you might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, is this man also a Shoto? Is that a Shoto? Uh-oh. Oh no. Akira from Virtua Fighter reflects almost all the physical traits of what these other very well-established Shotos have. Almost everything about him looks Shoto-like. In fact, if you were a Smash player and you got Junin Hien Diode by his ass with a shoulder check, you might be saying to yourself, that damn Shoto came in here in his assist trophy and that Shoto whooped my ass. I bet you conversations like this have existed at some point. Little do they know that this guy is not a Shoto. He is so far from a Shoto, you could argue Shotos are doing basic math and this dude is calculating the time and space of the universe. The amount of dexterity and information required to be good with this guy in comparison to any of these guys that might be considered Shoto-like is absolutely ridiculous. While you might be saying he looks like a Shoto, though, he is not. And this is where we get a bit closer to what the hell is Kazuya? There are many other Shoto examples here. Like, you get characters like Sakura, a perfect example of another Shoto. Not exactly the same, but what does Sakura not have? Oh, well, she doesn't have the visual style. Nothing about her resembles the visual stylings of all these essential, well-known Shotos. But she is a new age Shoto. Right? When Street Fighter was taking its place from the old Street Fighter 2s and they were trying to make something different out of it in the Street Fighter Alphas, Sakura was like the lead character of Street Fighter Alpha or Alpha 2 and beyond to sort of show that they're able to captivate some of the gameplay elements of these characters that are Shoto-like, but they don't have to look exactly like Shotos anymore. Another person might look at this character. Well, that's a Shoto as well. Well, she is a Shoto too, right? No, they did make a female Shoto. It's Makoto. Isn't Makoto a Shoto? Absolutely not. If we were to define things back to gameplay once again, Makoto has no defining features that define a Shoto. There are some interesting other observations because the Shoto sort of character throughout fighting games exists in so many different forms and variations, and it's not just visuals. I'm curious on what you guys would feel about this. Are these Shotos? Some might say technically yes, but definitely not. That's just a main character. Those are just Mortal Kombat ninjas, you know? MK ninjas permeate every single Mortal Kombat that has like ever existed. And there's always at least two throughout every single Mortal Kombat game. But they are, by large and effect, Mortal Kombat's version of Shotos. Although not Shotos because they don't feature the defining aspects, you know? This is like the other definitions of what people are looking at when it comes to Shotos. This isn't a gameplay thing, right? This also isn't an issue related to, do they wear a gi and do they look like this? A lot of people will consider the Shotos of games the main characters. And this is where I largely think a big interpretation from Smash fans are getting this from. I think a lot of people look upon these characters and they're like, oh, the main characters of games are generally Shotos, but we clearly know that's not the case. Now we get to the modern day, where suddenly we have a whole bunch of Smash Brothers fans and people that are looking at these characters and they're like, so what's a Shoto? Is it visuals? Is it gameplay? Are they main characters? What is going on? And then we get to another style of Shoto, technically. But just like Mortal Kombat, Mishimas are not Shotos in the same way that MK ninjas are not Shotos. You get a character that, once again, resembles something that looks fairly familiar, right? Pretty familiar going back to the old days, and you're like, man, these shotos once again appearing in this game again. But Mishimas 100% are not shotos. In fact, Mishimas have very much their own defined gameplay style that has literally existed since the beginning of Tekken back in the early 90s. And while a Mishima playstyle is definitely defined by a few elements, Mishimas are their own thing. They are not shotos. They might resemble shotos, but they're not. This could be a difficult thing to understand for many because this is literally coming from almost 20 plus years of fighting game history, but there is a lot of variances in between these. In fact, if we looked at the ultimate shoto game, Ultra Street Fighter 4, the ultimate shoto experience. Why do we say that Ultra Street Fighter 4 has the ultimate shoto experience? Well, it's the only Street Fighter game which essentially established shotos, right? To feature an absolute metric shit ton of shotos and hybrid shotos and new age shotos, and almost every single way you can stick a shoto, they stuck it into this game. And I fucking love it. The only two shotos you can truly define as a shoto by almost any definition of the standard are these two guys. As fighting games have gone on, and there's so many different games that have taken these character archetypes and done so many different things with them over time, that the definition of a shoto to many people will vary. And then at the same time, people will say, well, didn't Smash Brothers already have shotos? And then you'll ask yourself, is that guy a shoto? And now you're just proving my point. Now we're back to the fact, yeah, he has a fireball. Does he have a tatsu? He's got an uppercut. He definitely features some shoto characteristics. But even if people didn't know exactly what composes Mario as being the main character shoto, what is the thing that is immediately sticking into people's heads when you look at Mario and Luigi and Ken and Ryu? It goes back to the main character part. The definition of a shoto to so many people is going to vary dramatically because there are so many different types of shotos, and there are so many different types of main characters in fighting games that go back and resemble what these two characters do. It's almost like these two characters were the prime definition of base fighting game roster, going all the way to their eventual inclusion in something that is very different than what they are. By conclusion, Kazuya is not a shoto. I'm here to tell you, Kazuya is not a shoto, but I don't blame you for thinking that this dude is a shoto. I actually will give Smash fans a bit of credit in this situation. I don't think it's their fault for casually saying another shoto's in the game, because throughout so much history of fighting games, the definition of what makes a shoto can be very loose unless you're really keeping up with it. Crazy history that goes between all these characters, and I am barely touching the iceberg of shotos.